Experts failed to fix the AH-64 Apache, until a legendary female technician was flown in by helicopter. Part 1, The Impossible Problem in the Desert. The temperature was 118 degrees Fahrenheit on the tarmac at Forward Operating Base Eagle's Nest in eastern Afghanistan. Major Thomas Reeves stood under the wing of an AH-64 Apache, staring up at the main rotor system, and felt despair settle into his bones like sand. The helicopter wouldn't fly. It had been grounded for 8 days now, and those 8 days had cost the operation dearly. There were missions that couldn't be flown. There were patrols that couldn't happen. There was a vulnerability that left the forward operating base exposed. The problem was intermittent. That was the worst kind of problem. The Apache would fly fine for a while, and then, without warning, the avionics system would glitch. The autopilot would disengage. The targeting system would freeze. And if it happened in the wrong moment, with the wrong person in the pilot seat, it could mean the difference between life and death. The Army had sent their best people to diagnose the issue. A master sergeant from the maintenance school at Fort Rucker had spent 4 days examining the aircraft. He had run every diagnostic, tested every system, checked every wire. His conclusion was that the avionics suite was functioning normally, which meant the problem wasn't with the aircraft, it was with something else. But nobody could figure out what that something else was. "We might have to pull the bird out," the master sergeant, a man named Sergeant First Class Dennis Murphy, said. He was standing next to Reeves, sweating through his uniform in the oppressive heat. "Move it back to a larger forward operating base where we have more sophisticated equipment." "That's going to take time, sir." "Time we don't have." Reeves nodded. He understood the situation. Every day the Apache was out of commission, the operation's combat effectiveness decreased. The enemy didn't stop just because one helicopter was broken. The mission still needed to be flown. The patrols still needed to happen. They were just going to have to do it with fewer assets, which meant more risk for the crews. "How long would it take to move the aircraft?" Reeves asked. 3 days minimum, Murphy said. "That's assuming we can get a transport helicopter in here. Longer if we have to wait for one." 3 days. 3 days of vulnerability. 3 days of flying high-risk missions with equipment that wasn't optimal. 3 days that could easily turn into a week, or longer, if something else went wrong. Reeves was thinking through his options when his radio crackled to life. It was the commanding officer of the forward operating base, Colonel Sarah Hammond, calling from the operations center. "Major Reeves, I need you in the command center. Now." 20 minutes later, Reeves was sitting across from Hammond in the cramped air-conditioned space that served as the FOB's brain. Hammond was a woman in her late 40s, with gray streaking her dark hair and the bearing of someone who had been commanding troops in combat zones for longer than most people had been in the military. "I've been on the phone with higher command about the Apache situation," Hammond said without preamble. "They're frustrated. We can't move the bird. We can't fix it with the resources we have. And we can't afford to have it sitting on the tarmac for another week." "I understand, ma'am," Reeves said. "There's a possibility," Hammond continued. "There's a technician. A woman named Jennifer White. She's the most experienced Apache maintenance technician in the entire Army. She's legendary. She's been working on these birds for 23 years. She's in Fort Drum right now, training the next generation of technicians." Reeves listened. "I've been authorized to fly her in if you think it's necessary," Hammond said. "But I need to know, do you think one technician can fix this when our best people can't?" Reeves thought about Jennifer White. He had heard the stories. Every Apache maintenance person in the Army knew the stories. The technician who could walk into a hangar and diagnose problems just by listening to the sound of the engines. The technician who had saved hundreds of lives by catching maintenance issues that nobody else had spotted. The technician who had trained half the Apache maintenance personnel in the military. "Get her on the next helicopter available," Reeves said. Jennifer White was 62 years old, and she had spent 41 of those years working on helicopters. She had started as a young woman in her 20s, right out of high school, joining the army because she didn't know what else to do and because her father had been in the military and she wanted to understand his world. She had been assigned to the maintenance crew on AH-60 Blackhawks, which was where she had learned to listen to helicopters. To understand them not just as machines but as living, breathing entities that told you what was wrong with them if you knew how to listen. When the Army transitioned to AH-64 Apaches, Jennifer had made the switch. She had been one of the first women in Apache maintenance. She had worked her way up from enlisted to warrant officer. She had trained hundreds of technicians. She had worked on Apache helicopters in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Syria, in bases around the world. And then, 3 years ago, she had decided she was done with the field. She had taken a job as a master trainer at Fort Drum, teaching young technicians everything she knew. She had told herself that she was going to spend her remaining years before retirement in a classroom, not in the field. The phone call from Colonel Hammond came on a Tuesday afternoon. "Jennifer," Hammond said, "I know you're retired from field work, but I need you." Jennifer almost said no. She was 62 years old. She had earned the right to stay in a classroom. She had earned the right to not crawl through helicopter engine compartments in 100-degree heat. She had earned the right to rest. But something in Hammond's voice stopped her. "Tell me," Jennifer said. Hammond explained the situation. The Apache at Forward Operating Base Eagle's Nest. The avionics glitch that wouldn't show itself consistently. The problem that had stumped every expert they had sent. "I can't promise I can fix it," Jennifer said. "I know," Hammond said. "But I need someone who might be able to. And you're the only person I can think of who has the depth of experience to even have a chance." Jennifer had been at Fort Drum for 3 years. 3 years of sleeping in a comfortable bed. 3 years of not being covered in grease and sweat and sand. 3 years of teaching instead of doing. But she had also spent 3 years missing it. Missing the problem solving. Missing the helicopter. Missing the sense that her work mattered in a way that teaching sometimes didn't. "When would I need to leave?" Jennifer asked. "We can have a helicopter here to pick you up in 4 hours, Hammond said. Jennifer looked at the clock. It was 2 in the afternoon. "I'll be ready," she said. She packed a single bag with clothes appropriate for a desert deployment. She wrote an email to the commander of the training center explaining that she was being called away on an emergency assignment. And then she went to the landing pad and waited for the helicopter that would take her to Afghanistan. The flight took 14 hours. Jennifer sat in the cargo hold of a cargo plane, surrounded by supplies and mail and replacement personnel, and tried to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. Her mind was already working on the problem. Avionics glitch. Intermittent. Comes and goes. Stumped the best maintenance people in the Army. What could cause something like that? By the time she landed at Forward Operating Base Eagle's Nest, Jennifer had already worked through a dozen possibilities in her mind. Bad wiring. A corroded connector. A loose component that vibrated out of place at certain power levels. A sensor that was failing intermittently. A software glitch. A power distribution issue. The possibilities went on and on. But you couldn't solve the problem until you saw the problem. Major Reeves was waiting for her when she stepped off the helicopter. He saluted, which made Jennifer slightly uncomfortable. She had never been entirely comfortable with the hierarchical aspects of military life. To her, the helicopter was the hierarchy. The helicopter mattered. Everything else was secondary. "Technician White," Reeves said. "Thank you for coming." "Show me the bird," Jennifer said. She wasn't interested in pleasantries. There was a helicopter that needed to be fixed, and every minute they spent standing around talking was a minute the bird wasn't flying. Sergeant First Class Murphy took her to the hangar where the Apache was sheltered. The moment Jennifer saw it, her expression changed. Not dramatically. Just a subtle shift. But everyone in the hangar could see that she recognized something about the aircraft that they had missed. How long has it been grounded? Jennifer asked.
8 days,
Murphy said. Has anyone tried to fly it since the last glitch? Jennifer asked.
No, ma'am.
We've been running diagnostics on the ground, but we haven't taken it up again. Jennifer nodded slowly.
Show me the maintenance logs, she said.
Everything. Every flight, every maintenance procedure, every repair, going back 3 months. Murphy brought her the logs, and Jennifer sat down on a bench in the hangar and began to read. She read carefully, methodically, not rushing. She read for 2 hours straight, and nobody interrupted her because everyone in the hangar understood that this was Jennifer White doing what she did best, understanding the helicopter through its history. Finally, she looked up. The targeting system was replaced 4 months ago, she said. It wasn't a question.
Yes, ma'am, Murphy said.
The old one was malfunctioning, so we replaced it with a new unit. Who did the installation? Jennifer asked. Murphy's face flushed. That would have been Specialist Rodriguez. He's good. Very good. But he was new to Apache work at that time. Get me the installation documentation, Jennifer said. 20 minutes later, she was looking at the paperwork from the targeting system replacement. She read it once, then again, then a third time. And then she stood up. I need to see the new targeting system, she said. I need to look at how it's wired into the avionics suite. They took her to the aircraft, and Jennifer climbed up into the Apache's nose. The targeting system was in front of the pilot's seat, a complex array of electronics and wiring. Jennifer pulled out a small flashlight and examined every connection, every wire, every junction point. It took her about 15 minutes. When she climbed back down, she had a piece of wire in her hand. It was a small thing, maybe 2 inches long, but it was charred and discolored. This is your problem, Jennifer said calmly. During the targeting system installation, a wire was damaged. Probably nicked by a tool. The damage didn't completely sever the wire, so it functioned normally at first. But over time, as the aircraft was used, vibrations caused the damaged section to make intermittent contact with another wire. When they touched, it created a power surge that tripped the avionics system. When they separated, everything functioned normally again. That's why the glitch was intermittent. Murphy stared at the piece of wire. I checked every wire in that system, he said quietly. You checked them with your eyes, Jennifer said, not unkindly. This damage is on the back side of the wire, where you can't see it unless you know exactly what you're looking for. So what do we do? Reeves asked. Replace the wire, Jennifer said. That's all. Replace the wire, and the problem goes away. It took Specialist Rodriguez and Sergeant Murphy 40 minutes to replace the damaged wire. Then they ran diagnostics. Everything checked out. All the systems were functioning normally. We need a test flight, Jennifer said. That's going to take time to arrange, Reeves said. We'll need a pilot, clearance from command. I'll fly it, Jennifer said. Everyone in the hangar turned to look at her. Ma'am, Reeves said carefully, you're a technician. You're not a pilot. I'm also qualified to fly this helicopter, Jennifer said. My licenses are current. I've logged over 2,000 hours in Apaches. And I need to feel this bird flying to make sure the fix is solid. What Jennifer didn't say was that she needed to feel the vibrations, needed to listen to the engines, needed to understand the helicopter in the way that only flying could provide. What Jennifer didn't say was that she had missed this. Missed the experience of being in the air, of feeling the machine respond to her touch. But everyone understood anyway. 30 minutes later, Jennifer was strapped into the pilot's seat of the AH-64 Apache, running through the pre-flight checklist. A young pilot named Captain David Torres was in the gunner's seat, there to make sure everything stayed within the bounds of proper procedure. "You're going to love this bird," Jennifer said to Torres through the headset. "She's a beautiful machine." And then she took the Apache up. The moment the wheels left the ground, Jennifer felt it. The helicopter responded to her input exactly the way it should. The systems were functioning smoothly. The targeting system was working perfectly. She pushed the helicopter through its paces. She took it up to full power. She ran through maneuvers. She tested every system. And through it all, the Apache performed flawlessly. Jennifer didn't say anything to Torres. She just smiled. When she landed, the entire forward operating base was waiting on the tarmac. As she climbed out of the Apache, Major Reeves saluted her. Then Sergeant Murphy saluted her. Then every single person on that tarmac saluted her. Jennifer White, the legendary Apache technician, had fixed the unfixable. The story of how Jennifer White had been flown in by helicopter to fix an Apache that no one else could fix spread through the Army's aviation community like wildfire. It was too good a story not to spread. A legendary technician brought in from Fort Drum. An unsolvable problem with the avionics system. And the solution, a single damaged wire that everyone else had missed. Jennifer didn't want the attention. She wanted to go back to Fort Drum. She wanted to return to her classroom and her comfortable bed and her students who asked questions instead of demanding answers. But Colonel Hammond had other plans. "You're staying," Hammond said when Jennifer requested permission to leave. "We're going to need you here for at least a week. There are 6 other Apaches that need inspection. I want you to personally review their maintenance records and make sure there are no other issues that might have been missed." "With respect, ma'am, I'm a trainer now," Jennifer said. "I'm not a field technician anymore." "You were always a field technician," Hammond said. "You just gave yourself permission to stop. Now I'm asking you to remember who you are." So Jennifer stayed. Over the next week, she reviewed 6 other Apache helicopters. She caught issues that other technicians had missed. A loose connector on one. Early signs of corrosion on another. A wiring harness that was beginning to fray on a third. And with each discovery, the legend of Jennifer White grew. By the time she left forward operating base Eagle's Nest, there was an unofficial nickname for her circulating through the base, the White Knight. The technician who rode in on a helicopter and saved the day. Jennifer hated the nickname. She thought it was melodramatic and overstated. But she couldn't stop it from spreading. Back at Fort Drum, the commander of the training center called her into his office. "Jennifer," he said, "we need to talk about your role here." Jennifer's stomach sank. She thought this was going to be about the time she had been away. She thought they were going to restrict her, tell her she couldn't be gone again. "I've been authorized to create a new position," the commander continued. "A chief warrant officer position, dedicated to quality assurance and advanced problem-solving across all Army Apache maintenance. You would be responsible for training technicians not just on procedures, but on how to think like an expert. How to catch problems that others miss. How to approach complex diagnostic challenges." He paused. "It's more money," he continued. "More responsibility. More authority. And it requires you to stay here at Fort Drum and do what you do best, teach the next generation to think the way you think." Jennifer realized that she had been offered the perfect job. The job that would let her stay in a classroom, teach the technicians, and also occasionally get out in the field when there was a problem that needed her unique skills. She accepted. But the universe wasn't done with Jennifer White yet. 2 months later, she got a call from Major Reeves. "There's another Apache," Reeves said. "This one is in Iraq. Different forward operating base. Different problem. But the diagnostics team there says it's unfixable. They're asking if you can come." "I'm in a training position now," Jennifer said. "I'm not supposed to be doing field work." "I know," Reeves said. "But I'm asking you anyway. Because you're the best we've got, and we need you." Jennifer went to Iraq. Then there was a request from a forward operating base in Syria. Then another from a smaller base in Afghanistan. And another. Over the course of the next 2 years, Jennifer White became the Army's secret weapon for impossible Apache problems. She couldn't be called in on routine maintenance issues. But when something stumped the experts, when a problem seemed unsolvable, Jennifer would get a call. And she would drop what she was doing at Fort Drum and get on a helicopter. She became a legend in her own time. Apache technicians would talk about her the way pilots talked about the best pilots. The way soldiers talked about the most decorated officers. With a kind of reverence that went beyond professional respect. But Jennifer remained fundamentally uncomfortable with the attention. She was 64 years old when she finally sat down with her commander and said that she needed to step back. "I'm going to retire," she said. "In the next couple of years, I'm going to step away from this. I've given the Army everything I have. I need to live a normal life now." The commander understood. He didn't try to convince her to stay. He just said, "We're grateful for your service, Jennifer. We'll miss you." But before Jennifer could retire, the Army had one last mission for her. The call came on a Thursday morning in autumn. Jennifer was teaching a class on advanced diagnostics when her phone buzzed with a message. It was from General Michael Harrison, the head of Army Aviation Command. "Urgent. Call me immediately." Jennifer excused herself from class and called the number. "Jennifer," Harrison said without preamble, "we have a situation. It's not just one Apache anymore. It's a fleet. Multiple forward operating bases, multiple helicopters, all experiencing similar intermittent avionics failures. We've brought in every expert we have. Boeing. Lockheed Martin. Our best engineers from Fort Rucker. And nobody can figure out what's wrong." Jennifer listened without interrupting. "I'm going to be very direct," Harrison continued. "I need you. Not to train people. Not in an advisory capacity. I need you on the ground, working this problem alongside the experts. I need your unique perspective. And I need it now." "General, I'm 64 years old," Jennifer said. "I've already been deployed twice this year. I'm trying to transition to—" "I know," Harrison interrupted gently. "And I wouldn't ask if it wasn't critical. But Jennifer, this is critical. If we don't solve this, we might have to ground the entire Apache fleet. That affects our operations in 3 theater commands. That affects national security. I need you." Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. "Where?" she asked finally. "Fort Rucker," Harrison said. "We're setting up a task force. The best diagnostic people in the world, all in one place, trying to solve this. And I want you leading that task force." Jennifer hung up the phone and told her commander that she was being temporarily assigned to Fort Rucker for an emergency situation. When she arrived at Fort Rucker, Alabama, she found a small army of people already at work. Boeing engineers. Army maintenance specialists. Helicopter pilots. Researchers from universities. All of them working on the same problem: why were multiple Apaches experiencing avionics failures? The lead on the project was a man named Dr. Stephen Pierce, a brilliant engineer who had been designing Apache avionics systems for 30 years. He shook Jennifer's hand with obvious skepticism. "I've heard the stories about you," Pierce said. "The legendary technician. But this problem is beyond what field experience can solve. This is a systems engineering issue. This requires people who understand the architecture of the avionics suite at the design level." "Show me what you found," Jennifer said. Over the next 2 days, Jennifer sat in conference rooms while Dr. Pierce and his team walked through their findings. They showed her thousands of hours of diagnostic data. They showed her the results of their testing. They showed her their attempts to reproduce the problem in a controlled environment. And none of it made sense to Jennifer. Not because the data was wrong, but because it didn't tell the whole story. On the 3rd day, Jennifer asked a simple question. "Can I see the aircraft?" she said. "The aircraft are scattered across 3 different bases," Pierce said. "We've already examined them. We've collected diagnostic data. We have samples of failed components. We don't need to look at the actual aircraft again." "I do," Jennifer said. It took some coordination, but the Army arranged for Jennifer to visit one of the forward operating bases. She arrived at the base where one of the affected Apaches was stationed. She had the aircraft brought out of the hangar and into the sunlight. And she walked around it. She didn't use any instruments. She didn't run any diagnostics. She just walked around the Apache, looking at it, examining it, letting her decades of experience inform her eyes. After about 30 minutes, she stopped at the main rotor assembly. "What year was this aircraft manufactured?" she asked. 2012, the maintenance sergeant said. "And the avionics suite was upgraded when?" Jennifer asked. 3 years ago, the sergeant said. All the Apaches in that vintage were upgraded to the new avionics system at the same time. Jennifer nodded slowly. "I want to look at the power distribution system," she said. They climbed up into the aircraft, and Jennifer examined the wiring that ran from the main power source to the avionics suite. It was a complex network of cables and connectors, all carefully labeled and organized. And then Jennifer found something. On one of the primary power cables, near where it entered the avionics module, the insulation was worn. It wasn't obvious. It wasn't the kind of thing you would notice unless you were looking for it. But it was there. "How long has the helicopter been in service with the new avionics?" Jennifer asked. 3 years, the sergeant confirmed. "And how often does it fly?" Jennifer asked. "Multiple times per day," the sergeant said. "High-utilization aircraft." Jennifer pointed to the worn insulation on the cable. "The cable is vibrating," she said. 3 years of daily flight operations means 3 years of vibration. The insulation is wearing away. It's at the point now where the cable is starting to make intermittent contact with other electrical components. That's causing the avionics failures." The sergeant looked where she was pointing. Once she pointed it out, it was obvious. How had nobody seen this? Jennifer climbed down from the aircraft. "All of the aircraft that were upgraded at the same time are experiencing this," she said. It was a statement, not a question. "We've had reports from 16 aircraft so far," the sergeant confirmed. "Then the problem is the same on all of them," Jennifer said. "The power cables are wearing through their insulation due to vibration. The fix is to reroute the cables or to add protective shielding to prevent the vibration. But first, we need to check every upgraded Apache and inspect the power distribution cables." Jennifer called Dr. Pierce with her findings. Pierce was skeptical at first, but when Jennifer sent him photographs and detailed documentation of what she had found, he began to understand. "This is a design flaw," Pierce said, more to himself than to Jennifer. "When we upgraded the avionics system, we didn't account for the specific vibration patterns of this aircraft model. The new cables are stiffer than the old ones, which changes how they vibrate. And they vibrate at exactly the frequency that causes the insulation to wear through." "Can you fix it?" Jennifer asked. "Yes," Pierce said. "But it's going to require inspecting and potentially rewiring every upgraded Apache. That's going to take time." "Then we should start immediately," Jennifer said. Over the next 3 months, Jennifer worked with Dr. Pierce's team to develop a rapid inspection and repair protocol for the power distribution issue. They trained technicians on how to identify the problem and how to fix it. They coordinated logistics to ensure that aircraft could be rotated through for repairs without impacting operations. And they saved the Apache fleet from being grounded. When it was all over, General Harrison called Jennifer into his office. "You did it again," Harrison said. "You saw something that the brightest minds in the military couldn't see. You understood the problem in a way that design engineers couldn't." "I didn't understand it because I was brilliant," Jennifer said. I understood it because I've been listening to helicopters for 40 years. I've felt their vibrations. I've seen what happens when systems aren't designed with real-world operations in mind. I understand the difference between what happens in theory and what happens in practice. Harrison nodded. I'm retiring, Jennifer said. After this, I'm done. I'm going to leave the army, and I'm going to live a normal life. I've given enough. I understand, Harrison said. And you've earned that rest. But before you go, I want to ask you one more thing. What? Jennifer asked. I want you to leave us something, Harrison said. Your knowledge. Your way of thinking. I want you to write a guide. A manual. Something that captures the way your mind works when you approach a problem. Something we can use to teach the next generation of technicians to think the way you think. Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. That's not possible, she said finally. You can't teach someone to think the way I think. This isn't something that comes from a manual or a course or a training program. This comes from spending 40 years with helicopters. From understanding them not as machines but as living, breathing entities. From listening to them. From feeling them. Then teach people to listen, Harrison said. Teach them to feel. That's what we need more of in this military. People who understand machines at that level. People who don't rely just on data and diagnostics but on intuition and experience. Jennifer White officially retired from the Army on a cold December morning. The retirement ceremony was held at Fort Drum, and it was packed with people who had come to pay their respects to the legendary technician. There were Apache pilots whose lives had been saved by Jennifer's work. There were maintenance technicians who had learned from her. There were commanders who had called her in for impossible missions. There were engineers who had worked alongside her. General Harrison gave a speech about Jennifer's service. He talked about her dedication, her expertise, her willingness to go wherever she was needed, no matter the difficulty. Jennifer White, Harrison said, is the most valuable technician in the history of Army aviation. And more importantly, she's a reminder that sometimes the answers we're looking for are found not through complex systems and sophisticated equipment, but through the simple act of paying attention. Through listening. Through understanding the machines we're responsible for at a deeper level than just procedures and specifications. After the ceremony, Jennifer was surprised to find that she didn't feel sad about leaving. She felt relieved. She was ready for this next chapter. Ready to be a civilian. Ready to live a life that didn't involve being called to forward operating bases in the middle of the night. She took a job as a consultant with a helicopter manufacturing company. She worked part-time, advising on design and maintenance issues, but most of her time was her own. She bought a small house in the mountains of Colorado. She took up woodworking. She spent time with the grandchildren of her sister, who had remained close to her throughout the years. But she kept her phone on. And she still took calls from the Army. 2 years after she retired, there was a problem with a new Apache variant being tested. The Army called her. She flew down to Fort Rucker for a week, solved the problem, and flew back home. 3 years after she retired, there was an issue with a helicopter that was being used in a joint operation with an allied nation. The Army called her. She advised remotely, coaching a team of technicians through the repair process. 4 years after she retired, a young woman named Specialist Maya Rodriguez was struggling in her Apache maintenance training. Maya had the knowledge, but she didn't have the intuition. She didn't understand how to listen to the helicopter. So Jennifer spent a day with her, walking her through the process, teaching her how to feel the machine, how to understand it at a level beyond just the procedures. You have the mind for this work, Jennifer told Maya. But you also have to have the heart for it. You have to care about these helicopters. You have to understand that your work keeps people alive. That matters. Remember that, and you'll be fine. Maya Rodriguez went on to become one of the Army's most skilled Apache technicians. And she credited that one day with Jennifer White for changing everything. The stories spread. Jennifer White, the retired technician who still helped when called upon. The woman who understood helicopters better than anyone alive. The person who could walk into a situation and see what everyone else had missed. She became more of a legend in retirement than she had been while serving. 5 years after retirement, Jennifer was 70 years old. She was watching the news one evening when she saw a story about an Apache helicopter that had been damaged in a training accident. One of the pilots had been Jennifer's student, years ago. The pilot had survived but had lost an arm. Jennifer picked up the phone and called the pilot's hospital room. She talked to him about recovery, about rehabilitation, about the fact that his career as a pilot might not be over. There were ways to adapt, ways to continue serving, ways to transform a tragedy into a new kind of purpose. She didn't ask what was wrong with the helicopter. She didn't ask about the damage. She just listened, and she encouraged, and she reminded him that he was stronger than he thought. That conversation led to the pilot eventually becoming an instructor pilot, training the next generation of Apache operators. He credited Jennifer White for giving him the courage to keep going. Years passed. Jennifer aged. She was 75, and her hands weren't as steady as they used to be. She couldn't climb into helicopter engine compartments the way she used to. She couldn't spend hours in the hot sun doing diagnostic work. But her mind was still sharp. And the Army still called. When General Harrison retired, a new general named Patricia Moore took command of Army Aviation. Moore had never worked with Jennifer directly, but she had heard the stories. "I want to create a fellowship," Moore said to Jennifer when they spoke on the phone. The Jennifer White Fellowship for Advanced Apache Technicians. Young technicians who have shown exceptional promise would spend time with you, learning how you think, learning how you approach problems. It would be a mentorship program, with you as the mentor. Jennifer said yes. The Jennifer White Fellowship became one of the most competitive programs in the Army. Young technicians from across the entire military applied, hoping to spend time with the woman who had trained thousands of experts and solved hundreds of impossible problems. Jennifer worked with the fellows 2 or 3 days a month, teaching them to listen to helicopters, to feel the machines, to understand that expertise came from patience and attention and love for the work. Some of the fellows went on to have their own legendary careers. Some became training instructors, passing on what Jennifer had taught them. Some left the military but took the lessons with them into civilian careers. And through it all, Jennifer White remained the quiet center of it all. Not seeking attention, not wanting credit, just doing the work that mattered. 25 years after Jennifer White had first been flown in by helicopter to fix the Apache at Forward Operating Base Eagle's Nest, she received a phone call that brought everything full circle. It was from General Sarah Hammond. Now retired herself, Hammond had called to tell her something. "Jennifer," Hammond said, "do you remember the Apache you fixed? The one with the damaged wire in the targeting system?" Jennifer remembered. She remembered it vividly. It was the moment that had brought her out of retirement. The moment that had made her legend. "That aircraft is still in service," Hammond continued. "It's been upgraded multiple times. It's been maintained by technicians you trained. It's been flown by pilots you worked with. And it's still one of the most reliable helicopters in the entire Apache fleet." Jennifer felt something shift in her chest. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. It was the feeling of knowing that her work mattered. That the helicopter she had fixed 25 years ago was still making a difference. "There's something else," Hammond said. "The aircraft is being retired next year. They're going to decommission it. But before they do, they want to do a special ceremony. They want to recognize the aircraft's service. And they want you to be there." A year later, on a spring morning at Fort Campbell, Jennifer White stood in front of an AH-64 Apache helicopter. It was the same helicopter she had fixed 25 years ago. The paint was worn. The surfaces showed the wear of years of service. But it was still beautiful. Still magnificent. There was a large crowd gathered around it. Pilots who had flown it. Technicians who had maintained it. Commanders who had used it. The families of people who had been protected by its weapons. The families of people who had been transported by its rotors. An army band played the national anthem. A priest blessed the aircraft. And then General Sarah Hammond presented Jennifer with a medal. "Lieutenant Colonel White," Hammond said, using Jennifer's final rank, "this medal is presented to you in recognition of your service to the Apache helicopter and to every person who has served alongside this magnificent machine. You fixed this helicopter 25 years ago. And in doing so, you saved lives. You saved it once, and that decision rippled forward through a quarter-century of service. Thank you." The crowd applauded as Jennifer accepted the medal. And as she looked at the Apache, she thought about everything that had happened because of that one flight. That one mission. That one decision to leave her classroom and fly to a forward operating base in the desert. She had trained thousands of technicians. She had solved hundreds of problems. She had mentored young engineers and technicians. She had changed how the Army thought about maintenance and problem solving. She had created a legacy that would live long after she was gone. But none of it would have happened if that helicopter hadn't needed to be fixed. After the ceremony, Jennifer walked out to the Apache. She put her hand on the fuselage, feeling the metal beneath her palm. The helicopter didn't vibrate anymore. It was at rest. But Jennifer could almost feel the life in it. The missions it had flown. The people it had protected. The difference it had made. A young specialist approached her. Her name was Lindsay Martinez, and she had been one of the most recent Jennifer White Fellowship recipients. "I wanted to thank you," Lindsay said. "Before you go. I wanted to tell you that I'm going to make this my career. I'm going to be like you. I'm going to understand helicopters. I'm going to teach other technicians. I'm going to pass on what you taught me." Jennifer looked at this young woman, probably in her 20s, with bright eyes and the kind of enthusiasm that Jennifer remembered having when she was young. "Then you understand," Jennifer said. "You understand that the helicopter is what matters. Not the recognition. Not the stories. Not the legend. The helicopter. That's what it's about." Lindsay nodded. Jennifer smiled. That nod meant everything. It meant that the next generation understood. It meant that the knowledge would continue. It meant that long after Jennifer White was gone, there would be technicians listening to helicopters, feeling them, understanding them at that deep level that saved lives. That evening, back in her home in Colorado, Jennifer White sat on her porch and watched the sun set over the mountains. She thought about the first time she had heard that legendary Apache technician could solve any problem. She thought about how she had never imagined that one day, she would be that person. She thought about the Apache at forward operating base Eagle's Nest that wouldn't fly. She thought about the damaged wire that nobody else had seen. She thought about the decision to leave her classroom and get on a helicopter and go solve an impossible problem. And she thought about Specialist Lindsay Martinez, with those bright eyes and that understanding, carrying forward the tradition. Jennifer White had been the legendary technician who was flown in by helicopter to fix what nobody else could fix. But more importantly, she had been the beginning of something. She had been the bridge between one generation of Apache maintenance and the next. She had been the voice that said, "Listen to the helicopter. Feel the machine. Understand it at a deeper level than just procedures and specifications." And that voice would echo forward, through Lindsay Martinez and through the thousands of other technicians she had trained, for decades to come. The Apache helicopter that had needed to be fixed 25 years ago had brought Jennifer White out of retirement. And in doing so, it had created a legacy that would transform military aviation forever. The legendary female technician had done her work. And now, she could rest.